Good morning, everyone. Today I have been given, rather it's not my choice, but I was given a topic on this peptide drug discovery, and I thought to explore that for the audience here. I had been exposed to solid phase peptide chemistry during my postdoctoral career, so I thought of giving you the glimpse of what the peptide drug discovery is all about. And also looking at the theme of the conference, which is artificial intelligence and machine learning. I also have a few slides at the end of my talk. Once I finish my technical talk, which will demonstrate you what elsewhere is all doing in terms of machine learning and AI, and what they have developed tools and which are available commercially to the researchers as well. So we'll talk that at the end of my talk, once I finish my talk on the peptides. Okay, so today's topic is the Fredinger lactams and an application to its peptide drug discovery. So Fredinger lactams, what they are, I will briefly introduce you at the end of my talk. And this is the area I had worked in as well. So whatever the work you will see, it is the work I had done during my postdoctoral career, which also resulted in good publications and even the activity as well. The first introductions, the first slide decks, the initial slide will have some introductions regarding what peptide is all about. So as you all know, the proteins are complex of large molecules, which consist of many amino acids in specific orders actually. And if you see here, the bond, whatever it is, the amide bond is the peptide bond. You can see on the right hand corner. Are you able to see my cursor, right, moving, sir?
You can see.
Okay, perfect. And when they come together in like greater than 40 amino acid chains, then these polypeptides are called proteins. And if they are less than 40 amino acid chains, they are called peptides there. Right? The proteins and the peptides acquire the three-dimensional structure. If you see here at the bottom, they acquire these three-dimensional conformations, and the protein structure is directly related to its functions. That means that if the structure or shape of the protein gets disrupted, the function will also get disrupted there. So at the bottom, I have captured these four types of protein structure. One is the primary structure, followed by the secondary structure, which is the helical structure. You can see there. Again, this goes via intramolecular hydrogen bonding between those amino acids. And then there is a tertiary structure and a quaternary structures there on the right hand side. And the function of the protein is determined by its non-covalent 3D structures. If you see the various dihedral angles are captured here on the bottom of the slide. So this slide contains like which diseases or therapeutic areas there is development for peptides as drug molecules. And if you can see here, there are a lot of compounds, and the color coding is there. The blue color is the phase 1, which is, you can see at the first bar, most of the time the phase 1 is the start of the clinical phase, followed by the phase 2, phase 3, and approved drugs. So if you see, there are a lot of approved drugs. In all, total 56 compounds got approved there. So the peptides basically have impacted the development of the modern pharmaceutical industry and have contributed significantly to the advancement of the biological and chemical sciences. And the fundamental studies in the first of the 20th centuries, which were aimed at understanding the structures and physiological role of peptide hormones, such as insulin. If you see, in 1922, the insulin got identified there, right? And this was the initial isolation of insulin happened in 1921, which started the pace and development of the overall peptide drugs there, and it reaching patient just a year later, and then becoming the first commercial available drug. If you see, the insulin got as a first commercial available peptide drug in 1922. And it is considered as a miracle drug, and still now also we are using insulin to treat diabetes as well, right? After this, a lot of development started there. If you see, followed by the penicillin again is alpha amino gamma lactam. So it's one of the type of Fredinger lactam, and I have that in my subsequent slide as well. And if you see, overall from 1900 till 2000, the discovery kept on going on, and peptides in the 20th century became a niche area to for the advancement of the peptidic molecules as a drug. They neither are a large molecule, they are neither small molecule, they are in between them. In between, they are said that because the molecular weight is lesser than the biologics there. And this synchronous and spectacular success of the recombinant biologics has also driven the re-examination of the peptide field for the new opportunities due to their shared biological characteristics and scientific advances relevant to the both areas there. And the following couple of slides, you will have I have captured the information on what drugs where the peptide drugs are been approved by either FDA or EMA there, and what is their therapeutic targets and the primary use there. And this is just for information. And if you need this slide deck, you can actually capture. I have captured the reference as well. This is a book there. So if you wish, you can go through the book, or I can also share the information, the slide deck in a PDF format also if required there. So if you see here, the drugs are being captured in this particular slides. Now talking about the disadvantages or the advantage of this, as I was telling, this peptide drugs came as a mid-sized molecule. They are neither the biologics as large micromolecules, or they are neither small molecules, and that's why the interest in developing them as a drugs kept on going there. And if you see here, the strong points about this, particularly the mid-sized compounds, are that they are also cellular permeable, particularly the cyclic peptides. They actually started their development started because of the improving in the cellular permeability there. They also are specific and with a lesser side effects there. So in all, if you talk about the advantages, these may be the natural biological messengers for most endocrine signaling pathways. These peptides are membrane impermeable. They have very high conformational flexibility. Again, due to the 3D structures, if you see, as I told you about the intramolecular hydrogen bonding, this gives them the conformational flexibility, which improves their efficacy and safety of these compounds. The intramolecular hydrogen bonding also gives particular conformation to the peptides, and that's the reason the penetration through the cells also becomes not an issue reaching to the target there. Again, due to their large size, the challenge is having them as an orally bioavailable drug. So most of the time they are injected IV production, and the cost and storage of this particular drugs is a challenge there. So when you see as a this picture, most are inactive orally. Some larger proteins may be taken up by the liver. Again, there are enzymes in the liver, the proteases, which actually cleaves, and you see the proteolytic cleavage can inactivate these proteins or the peptides drugs as well. And this is one of the challenge there. The small proteins and peptides also rapidly are filtered by the kidneys, and they are lost in the urine as well. So excretion is a challenge there. Insolubility also due to the aggregation is a challenge with this particular type of drugs there. And when you basically give those as IV, and that's the one of the major routes of administration there, they actually then give you the high blood levels when basically they are injected at the point of injection there. So sudden increase in the concentration of those drugs also is a challenge there. The immune system also clears this particular proteins, and because of this, there might be multiple severe reactions coming out of it. They also can actually bind with other receptors based on their flexibility there, and that's also one of the challenge which brings in the DDIs or the basically off-target activities there. So if you see here, the peptides, they actually can modify themselves and try to bind to the peptidic complex, and then also can have those conformation changes to actually induce fit themselves into a peptide receptor complex, providing the desired biological activities. And this use of this therapeutics is limited by several factors, which include their low metabolic stability towards proteolysis, as I showed you in the earlier diagram there. When you look at their phylogenetic tree, the strong lines, the bold lines, basically are the one which have the major developments in the peptide drug discovery in terms of the peptidomimetics there. So starting from the oligomeric linear peptides change, there is a lot of development as a in terms of oligomeric linear peptidomimetics or cyclic peptides. and have various examples of these cyclic peptides, be a sulfide bond or a disulfide bond as well. And if you see, there is a lot of development for the disulfide instead of the monosulfide bond, particularly towards the cyclic peptides there. Then peptide-mediated hybrids are have been also undergoing major research, and there are a lot of drugs with the help of this peptide-mediated. People initially started with this alanine scan because one needs to know which amino acid replacement, if they do with for the peptidomimetic, will actually impact the desired activity or enhancing the activity of that particular drugs. So for those, alanine scan was the initial part of this, but later on people have started using other approaches for this peptidomimetic areas as well. And then yes, you might be also knowing about this beta peptides or the protein mimics, which actually are also one of the classical areas for this peptidomimetics. And peptides are the one which actually have an alkyl. The amino acids are N-alkylated, and that's why they are called peptoids there. And their sulfonamides part. And sulfonamides are the one which actually are also one of the greater functional groups which actually modulate your C-log piece and provide you the desired permeability to reach about your target. They also actually modulate your protein bindings, and that's why this class of sulfonamides, be it in a small molecules or in the peptides, actually are used nowadays more enhanced. And if you see, there is a group, I forgot the name of that person, but there is a group in who clearly works only on the sulfonamide or the cyclic sulfonamide areas as well. If you talk about this peptide bonds, you can mimic this for the peptidomimetics, and you can, if you see the X, the peptide bonds I was talking about is the N-alkylation there. You can have the azapeptides. My postdoc was is working a lot in terms of these azapeptides there to improve the activity as well as modulating the conformations of the peptides, intramolecular peptide bonds there as well. Thioamides are lesser used as the peptidomimetics, but the alkene dipeptides are also one of the classical examples. And cyclosporine, you can see it might also, I don't remember, but yes, it has this alkenic bond for the dipeptide bond, and it is used. People actually started functionalizing those double bonds as well nowadays to improve the pharmacokinetic properties of these double bonds. Then you have the ethylene or the hydroxyethylene bridges, followed by the methylene, and then this is the sulfonamide part I was talking about. This is a very very nice functional group actually, which has the polar properties as well. It helps you modulate the log piece based on the nitrogen sulfur things, because it's very critical to optimize your nitrogen count in the drug molecule as well. So sulfonamides help you there. It has a larger size as well. It occupies that larger size, so because of that it restricts the rotations as well. So this is these few advantages gives them edge over the other functionalities, in particular the drug discovery things. Talking about now the developments, like if you talk about this somatostatin, if you see here, the somatostatin was the naturally occurring agonist there, and the development, and again this is the cyclic peptide if you see here, and they have developed the analogs from this to the sandostatin, which is octreotide. This is somatostatin is a synthetic agonist which mimics the biological actions of the natural hormones. The development, the modification of this somatostatin to the octreotide was used to treat the growth hormone producing tumors in acromegaly patients and pituitary tumors secreting thyroid stimulating hormone, as well as other indications as well. Another classical hormone which is used largely for the studies of peptidomimetics is the gonadotropin releasing hormone or the luteinizing hormone releasing hormone, which is the 10 amino acid peptides there, which is produced by the gonadotropin neurons in hypothalamus there. So this is one of the initial targets of all the peptide chemistry for the discovery of new drugs as well, because it's classical. You can replace the amino acid one by one. It's a 10 mer peptide, so you can replace individual amino acid by your changes, whatever you want to bring into the structure of those peptides, which might impact in a desired activity. So if you see on this slide, the GnRH was actually modified to a lioprolide, which is synthetic non-peptide again for which has optimized for increase in potency and half-life with diverse clinical applications there. And if what changes they have done the tryptophan here. You see here, there is a tryptophan here, and then the degarelix also got modified. They have used the pyridyl version of this, and they have alkylated these hydroxy groups as well. So it's a other profile. It has remarkable sustained release subcutaneously with PK profile and used in the treatment of hormone responsive prostate cancer also. So the development of the classical GnRH led to a couple of clinical candidates as well. 8-arginine vasopressin is an again naturally occurring peptide there, the compound there, and desmopressin actually is used. It's modified analog. If you see, both are the cyclic peptides again, and completely in my presentation, if you see, most of the drugs are coming out of the cyclic peptides. And the other thing is that they are mostly used for the indications such as diabetes or metabolic disorders there, because for a sustained release or the sustained the dosage is quite safer to take for the patients, because they will be taken over a prolonged period of time there. Coming to the another angle on the oxytocin, this is the first peptide hormone to be made synthetically. Is a nonapeptide, is 9-mer peptide there, produced by the hypothalamus and used to induce the induce labor in case of the non-progression of the paturation and for the treatment of amnioturia. So developments of this oxytocin to carbetocin or the atosiban have led to either the temperature stable formulations, particularly toward the carbetocin, or the atosiban, which was designed for the tocolectic activities to suppress the premature labor. So again, the development, the peptidomimetics, particularly the efforts of the peptidomimetics, and if you see the isoleucine is changed here. The amine group is introduced here in this one, and in the top, in the both the things, they have actually alkylated this phenolic OH either to the methoxy or the ethoxy group there as well. So smaller changes can help you to improve the pharmacokinetic properties, stabilize the compound towards the proteolytic cleavage, and improve its overall properties as a drug. I was mentioning about the cyclosporine analog, right? So this is the classical peptide analog, the N-alkylated version. If you see cyclosporine N-alkylated version, and vancomycin is again a naturally occurring compound. These are produced by the bacteria and fungi and are not synthesized at ribosomes there. So if you see what kind of activity this vancomycin bring in, and this next slide, the subsequent slide shows it. This slide shows you that the vancomycin knotting of the side chains created the cavity. If you see here the cavity, which actually imparts its activity, the conformation practically imparts its activity. The cavity is capable of binding to the component of the bacterial cell wall, and that's what results in its activity, antibacterial activity of this vancomycin analog. Coming to the Fredinga-lactams now. If you talk about the Fredinga-lactam, the placement of the alpha aminolactam, if you see, this is the alpha aminolactam, NH. Moiety into a peptide chain is effective means of constraining conformational peptide, conformational liberty. And peptide analogs possessing this alpha aminolactam have exhibited improved potency and efficacy over a period of time. These secondary structures of the proteins and the peptides is an essential determinant of their bioactivity. So information concerning the biological activity, conformation of a peptide is imperative for understanding the function and may be gleaned by employing organic surrogates. And these are the organic surrogates which mimics different secondary structures. The incorporation of the Fredinga-lactam found application in actually mimicking the secondary structures there. And these peptide mimics containing these non-peptide structural elements have been pursued to imitate the conformation and functional groups of the native peptides there. So methods for systematic scannings of peptides apart from these Fredinga-lactams have been employed as a strategy to do the structure-active relationship apart from this alanine or inorganic amino acid scans there. This beta amino acid, or also there are other scans such as beta amino acid, proline, macrocyclic lactams, or N-alkyl amino acid scanning for identifying the importance of the side chains there. And these are the important tool for characterizing the biological conformations of the native peptides. This helps in accelerating the development of the peptide leads into mimic candidates. So every amino acid in a particular peptide, the length of it may be a 10 amino acid peptide chain, 10 mer or a 30 mer peptide. Every amino acid you have to do the replacement one step by step to see the changes in the activity, what it is giving you once you do those change at a particular site there. So once you do that, you will come to know that replacement of a particular amino acid at a particular chain there will actually produce you the desired activity or the desired pharmacokinetic properties there. This also brings in the beta-turn mimics in the peptide there, and such lactam containing peptides have since been used as a chemotherapeutic or anti-cancer agents as well. So the initial application of the Fredical lactam came from the sarcosine the cyclic cycloanalog of the alanine sarcosine, which actually helped once they build the lactam there, they have improved their feed efficiency in the ruminant animals there. These possible confirmations actually were examined by Merck molecular modeling system. So this came of the effort of the molecular modeling, and which again suffices to the theme of this FDP there. So this great effort, and this is very rare to get the molecular modeling effort and to actually design a peptide for a particular activity as well. Other few examples, if you see here, are the arginine, dolsatanin, tatin, and the penicillin. When I was mentioning about the penicillin, and it was already captured there as a development earlier in my earlier slides there. So again the gonadotropin hormone or the luteinizing hormone releasing hormone, the replacement of the one of the amino acids by the Fredical lactam had improved the potency by 8.9 times compared to its native or the parent peptide there. And replacement of this leucine with the alpha amino gamma lactam in the dopamine receptor improved the potency by tenfold there. So such kind of replacement gives you the beta-turn mimics, that gives you conformational stability to the peptide there, and may improve the activity, efficacy, or the pharmacokinetic properties due to the ring constraints there. What kind of various developments or the changes of the Fredical lactam is possible? So this is the original Fredical lactam, where X can be like, it can be 5-member, 6-member, or 7-member peptide there. So you can have a bicyclic extension of this Fredical lactam. You can have fused aromatic ring to this Fredical lactam or a spirolactams there. So these kind of various modifications have been done after the initial developments of the Fredical lactam to improve the potencies there. So if you see in this case, once they have this bicyclic fuel atom, they started changing the ring size of this lactam, and the impact increase in the ring size has started improving the potency of this compound. So for 6-member ring, the isomer A, again these are so once you fix the lactam, one of the center gets fixed there and the other centers changes. So that's why you will not have, if you have two enantiomers, two centers, there will be 4 enantiomer possibles, 4 isomer possible. But because one isomer is fixed because of the ring constraint due to the lactam, you only will be having a 2 enantiomers possible there. So due to that, if you see for a 6-member lactam there, the isomer A is more potent, but if you go on and increasing the ring size there, it has improved. Sorry, the IC50 is lost there. So I'm sorry for that. The most active IC50 will be for the 5-member lactam there, and with the ring size, one of the isomers started losing. And again, why there is isomer A? Because again, when you have a 9-member lactam there, the ring size will be so high that the restriction of rotation will be brought in there, and because of that, you have they have end up in only one isomer, predominant isomer over the other isomer, and that is the reason you see the activity for only the one isomer there. Coming to the ACE inhibitor activities of the azipinones, the benzapiril was invented by Ciba-Geigy there, and then marketed subsequently by Novartis under the trade name Lotensine there. And this is also one of the classical examples of the fused lactam there, where the ring size modifications, if you see on the left-hand side table, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7-member rings to 7-member lactam there. From the 6-member lactam, they have improved there, and the benzapiril is the 7-member lactam there. N is equal to 1 there. So sorry, 6-member lactam. And if you see the IC50s of this one, there is practically no change in the IC50s with the R1 is equal to phenyl or the R4 is equal to phenyl. If you see here, the R4 is equal to phenyl. So what it says that a particular conformation or a particular isomer only is a potent there, even though you have the substituents as phenyl groups either at this position or that one. So the three-dimensional space which it occupies, the phenyl rings, is actually imparting the activity, making up that isomer more potent there. When you talk about the ACE-NAP inhibitors for the benzofused lactams there, this is the general type of benzofused lactam with either X is equal to CH2 or S. They have tried to ring open and cyclize here to form the lactam there, or they also the BMS compound which actually has the fused ring after the ring opening, the cyclization at this position there. The omapatriate was designed, and this initially was a BMS 18676 and came as a drug from Bristol Myers Squibb company there. So for the renin inhibitors, renin is actually an aspartic proteases which actually helps in formation of the angiotensin 1, which is a decapeptide there. And to have renin inhibitors to reduce the exposures of the angiotensin 1, the development of this modification of this alpha globulin angiotensin receptor, people have taken the approach there. And if you see at the bottom, various Fredinga lactams they have designed or synthesized to mimic those activity there, so that they will actually produce less of angiotensin 1. Various spreading lactams, again, after the design, if you see here, the lactam introduced here, the 5-member lactam has a IC50 of 6.5 nanomolars, but increase in the size they have seen loss in the potency. And we have seen in the couple of slides earlier as well, the increase in the size of the lactam has seen drop down in the potencies also there. So it is quite consistent that if you go from 5 to 6 to 7 or 8-member rings, you will certainly lose those activities, which has been found by multiple researchers. So various applications for the different biological drugs, if you see here, they have been used, this peptidomimetics have been used for addressing they as a thrombin inhibitors, as a factor 10 inhibitors. They have classically used over the year as a hormone releasing peptide 6 analogs as well, gamma secretase inhibitors, the dopamine modulators. And one of the, even though they being the large molecules, it has been seen also that they do cross the blood-brain barriers and occupy those neuroreceptors there, and that's why you see they are also one of those dopamine modulators there. And I think in next, yeah, they have been already a couple of examples. I will get back to the slide where I have the details of the modifications being used as a neuroreceptors as well, neurotransmitters. So how you can make those Fredinga lactams there? So initially, the Fredinga lactams were synthesized by intramolecular alkylation with the methyl derivative of sulfonium ion, and they have formed this 5-member lactam there. Johnson's have formed this by intramolecular alkylation using the Mitsunobu reactions to form this spirolactam there, or the Rappaport method, where they have been cyclized with the help of the reductoamination followed by the lactam cyclination. On solid phase, O'Donnell has done this bisalkylations of solid supported alpha amino imide to form this lactam, the 5-member Fredinga lactam there. What we have done, again, this is my postdoc over there. So what we have done, that we have used this cyclic sulfamidate strategy to on the solid support to cyclize to form the Fredinga lactam there. So it's you can easily open the cyclic sulfamidate to ring open there, and then once you have any nucleophile attack there, you can go for the cyclization there. So these cyclic sulfamidates have served in the as important roles as the building blocks for the synthesis of alpha gamma diamino acid analogs as well. And the sequence featuring cyclic sulfamide ring opening with amino esters followed by this ester solvolysis, and lactam sanguine was pursued using the N-phenyl cyclic sulfamide cumul ester as well. So if you see on the next slide, the top thing is in the solution phase, where we have made the cyclic sulfamide FMOC protected cyclic sulfamide analog of the homoserine there. So the challenge is that if you see here in this particular group, the cumul ester is imparted to stop those lactamization at this particular stage here. If you don't have a proper substituent here, then you might end up the lactam in solution phase itself. The intramolecular cyclization will go there, and you will have the lactam formation in itself there. Lactone formation, not the lactam formation there. So we have employed the cumul ester to reduce those lactone formation there, and end up in having the cyclic sulfamide there. So this cyclic sulfamide was reacted at DMF 70 degrees centigrade with the phenyl leucine supported on the solid supported there. And then we were able to ring open that nucleophilic displacement with this one, then cyclize there to form the lactam there, and then followed by the normal protocol of improving, adding the amino acids there. On the solid supported, we were able to form the 5-mer amino acid chain there. And this strategy then to improve the yield. The problem here was that we were not getting the conversion of the lactam formation in a higher yields. So that was one of the challenge there. And to improve that, we had to go back to the methyl ester there. So as I told you, the challenge with this particular thing with the homoserine, if you do this reaction, you will end up in lactam formation. So I was able to actually control those lactone formation, reduce those lactone formation, and drive that to the cyclic sulfamidite, followed by the oxidation to sulfamidate there with the methyl ester there. But it is really challenging to control this lactone formation there at this particular stage, which is a dead end to that particular reaction there. Once you have that, same way you have n number of, you can have your amino acid linked to the peptide there. We have used the resin bound peptide, the ring amide resin, we have used it here, the solid arrow, which was subjected to the cyclic sulfamide formed here, was subjected to nucleophilic displacement to form this chain, followed by the cyclization there. So we were able to isolate this particular amino acid chain and subsequently cyclize that to the phenyllactam. Deproduction of the FMOC group and the increase of the chain will help you get those phenyllactam rich peptides there. The advantage, as I told you, that we did the lactam scan and made substitutions of replace the amino acids with the phenyllactam at every possible stage, and then check the activity of that particular peptide to see which is one of the active peptide. And then later on this, we have also modified instead of the alpha amino lactam, the beta amino gamma lactam there, which got published in the JACS as well later on. So in conclusion, this phenyllactams and their analogs, which can be regarded as a chemically diverse alpha beta gamma lactam bridge peptides, have made an important and impacted the field of drug discovery there. We have utilized this strategy again on the gonadotropin releasing hormone to see that the change in the alpha amino particular amino acids with the gamma phenyllactam has imparted in what desired activity there. This was the first effort with the solid gonadotropin hormone on solid support there as well. So this resulted in understanding particularly the amino acid. Later on, the group went ahead and did on the various amino acid chains, understanding their structural constraints and the beta-turn mimics as well. Switching gears to the theme of the FDP there, the AI or the machine learning there. So what Elsewhere is doing in terms of AI, artificial intelligence and machine learnings for the advancement of the predictive technologies there. So when you talk about this drug design cycle there, which is design, make, test, and analyze there, couple of important things at in the designing of the lead candidates are the match molecular pairs, like what you will replace there for improving the pharmacokinetic properties, and optimizing pharmacology in terms of controlling the off-target activity there, followed by what novel analogs you can synthesize there. So what we started, the initial development, which is actually will be added to the tool called Reaxys is the match molecular pairs there. So what we have done is that we have collaborated with Swiss Institute of Bioinformatics there. We have our own content coming off the Reaxys and Reaxys Medchem data, which and their in-house data. So the tool which is developed on the in the basis of the artificial intelligence actually picks up the pair replacement, what exactly you can replace. In this case, say you want to replace the pyrrole or the oxazole there. So what kind of various pairs extraction you can do it to either improve the efficacy, to control the CYP. Basically, if you are pyrroles or pyrazoles, lot of they are actually CYP can inhibit there. So control those metabolism there automatically. Then automatically you will control the toxicity coming out of those. So this effort has actually in the development now. It will be embedded into Reaxys tool, which actually have the capacity to provide almost more than 95 lakhs of molecular replacement for the structural features, to improve the structural features, which actually can result in improving the pharmacokinetic properties. Another development which I was talking about is about optimizing pharmacology there. So what we are doing in terms of optimizing pharmacology, we all know that when you have two structures related to each other, the assumption is that they will be acting on the similar targets there. They will be acting on this hypothesis or on this assumption there. What we have done, that we have done this reverse screening or the target prediction based on the molecule targeting an unknown target there. Again, utilizing the in-house content from Reaxys Medchem data, which is coming out of 21,000 journal articles, more than 5 million experimental properties data. We have utilized those library of molecules which might act on the quite unknown targets there, with the help of again Swiss Institute of Bioinformatics, because they have developed the tool in-house, and the combined data set, which actually can predict, if you see in the graph there, what common targets can be predicted. If they don't have a common target at a point there, you will see that molecule having desired activity against a particular target there. So this particular effort will help you predict the off-target activities that a similar structure feature in a particular compound will predict you what kind of desired activity that particular structure feature will bring in there, and so that you can control that off-target activity coming out of those. It will give you the list of possible target that particular substitution will bring in there. Now coming to the synthesis part, we can have those design there, but to make those design possible, if we write or draw anything on the paper there, and to synthesize a particular new compound is a quite challenge there, because we have to apply our synthetic skills and bring in our retrosynthetic skills to come up with a particular synthesis of a compound. For that, we have collaborated with Professor Mark Moller to develop a tool which will help you to design a synthesis of novel compounds there. So this particular tool again works on the basis of machine learning and artificial intelligence there. This is 30 times faster. It has proved there, and now it is already commercially available. Major pharma companies have already started subscribing to this particular tool there. So this commercially available there for people to subscribe there. This system solves retrosynthesis for twice as many molecules as possible there, which is reliant on non-extracting and encoding rules by hand. And it is actually automated and extraction of the rules there. Recently, we got awarded for the Global Life Science Award 2020 for this particular predictive retrosynthesis tool as well, last month. So how that tool works. So if you have a particular compound, you draw that particular compound, and then the tool will go and search back with the commercial starting materials there. Big pharma companies have a lot of intermediates which they can also use as starting material. So one can actually integrate their in-house intermediates also within the tool, which can be used as starting materials for a synthesis of unknown compound there. Then that routes, you will come to know how many routes are possible, and every route will have a confidence score. If you see, the number of steps are captured and the confidence score is captured here. You can view that as a table view or tree view. The synthetic route and everything, every step is linked to the Reaxys thing. You can go and have a similar kind of reactions checked in the Reaxys, so that you can actually perform that experiment there. the higher the confidence score, the maximum confidence score 1, the if you are closer to 1, you have a chances that this particular reaction step will work efficiently there. How does it work there? So what we have done is that we have trained this data set with more than 15 million chemistry reaction data set, and which has more than 4 lakhs of auto extracted rules there. This also is the Reaxys data is powering this world's leading AI and ML development in predictive chemistry, including this MIT, SRI, University, Cambridge, and AstraZeneca effort. The other strong point of this particular tool is that we have integrated 100 million negative chemical reactions to this tool. So the predicting tool knows that which reaction will not be successful enough because of the data of negative reactions embedded into it as well. And hence the confidence score or the predictability of this particular tool helps you in giving robust synthetic routes for unknown compounds there. This works on the neural networks coupled with the Monte Carlo tree searcher, which is similar technology that is powered by AlphaGo there. So these are few strong points of this predictive retrosynthesis tools, which gives you robust predictions there. We have also done this chemical Turing test, known as double-blinded test with organic chemists. So 45 PhDs and postdocs worked, which we had given a molecule there, and they came up with the synthetic routes of their own and from the tool, and they have actually synthesized that particular route in their labs, and the predicted ones were found more robust than the actually designed by the chemist or the postdocs there from their knowledge of retrosynthetic chemistry. So this was a proof or a proof of principle, you can say, for this particular predictive retrosynthesis tool also. So this ends my talk there.